3 times a day. No one in Iron Haven, Ohio, ever said Victor Moretti was dangerous. They said he was successful. On paper, Victor was a respected real estate developer. The kind of man whose name appeared on hospital wings, scholarship plaques, and charity galas. He wore tailored suits, shook hands with politicians, and smiled for cameras like someone with nothing to hide. But Iron Haven didn't see what happened after midnight. They didn't see who answered Victor's calls. And they never asked how certain deals moved so quickly, or why certain people disappeared from zoning meetings forever. Victor Moretti didn't need fear. Fear came with him. That night, he wasn't in Iron Haven for business headlines. He was there for land, forgotten property on the outskirts of the city, once part of an old rail and storage route. The kind of land no one noticed until someone powerful wanted it. Rain fell hard, soaking the cracked concrete and rusted fences around the abandoned livestock warehouses. Victor stepped out of his black SUV, coat immaculate despite the storm. His driver stayed inside. His security detail remained silent. Victor preferred to walk alone when thinking. As he passed the final warehouse, something cut through the rain. Not a voice, not a shout, a sound too weak to be intentional. Victor stopped. It came again, a dry cough, followed by metal scraping against wood. He turned slowly toward the warehouse. Iron Haven was quiet at night. Too quiet for noises like that. Victor pushed the door open. The smell hit first. Damp straw, rust, old blood. Then he saw her. She was curled in the far corner of the warehouse, knees pressed to her chest, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. A single hanging bulb flickered above her, throwing shadows that made her look smaller than she was. Bare feet, bruises climbing her arms and neck. A torn shirt that looked like it had once been white. Her eyes snapped toward the door. She flinched so hard Victor felt in his chest. That reaction told him everything. Victor raised his hands, slightly, slow and controlled. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't answer. "How long have you been here?" he asked. Her lips trembled. "I don't know." "Who put you here?" She hesitated. Fear war with exhaustion. Then she whispered, "My father." The word father sat heavy in the air. Victor stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "What's your name?" "Emily Hale." "How old are you, Emily?" 17. Victor's jaw tightened. "And your father," he said evenly. "What does he say about this?" Her fingers clenched into her sleeves. "He says it's for my own good." Victor crouched, keeping his voice calm. "How often?" She looked up at him. 3 times a day. Morning, afternoon, night. Not punishment. Routine. Victor closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them again, something had shifted. Not rage, not panic, but calculation. "Why?" he asked. She swallowed. "He says I'm stubborn. That my mother spoiled me before she died. That locking me up keeps me obedient." The bulb flickered. Victor stood. He stepped outside, pulled out his phone, and made one call. "Bring water. A coat. Food. Now." When he returned, Emily was watching him like he might vanish. She accepted the coat with shaking hands. Drank water like she didn't trust it would last. Victor waited, then asked, "Where's your father right now?" "At Murphy's bar. He always goes after." Murphy's bar was 4 blocks away. Victor walked there through the rain, like a man heading into a meeting. Inside, Thomas Hale laughed loud and sloppy, surrounded by men who looked just as hollow as he was. His face hardened when he saw Victor approach. "You lost." Thomas sneered. Victor studied him. The arrogance, the drink, the confidence of a man who believed ownership extended to flesh. "I was just at your warehouse," Victor said calmly. Thomas's smile twitched. Yeah, there was a girl inside. Silence crept across the table. Thomas leaned back. You break into my property. You start asking questions about my kid? She's not your property. That did it. Thomas stood, fists clenched. You don't know what kind of girl she is. Victor didn't raise his voice. I know she's locked in a cage. Thomas laughed. Discipline. You wouldn't understand. Victor paused, then offered something unexpected. I'll hire her, he said. She leaves tonight. You get paid. The bar went quiet. Thomas's face twisted. You don't take what's mine. He swung. Victor didn't. The punch never landed. Victor stepped inside the motion, drove a precise strike into Thomas's ribs, and followed with another that dropped him hard. Chairs scraped. Men jumped up. Victor leaned down, voice low. Touch her again, and this conversation ends very differently. He walked out. That night, Victor Moretti believed he'd made a clean decision. Protect the girl. Remove her from danger. End of story. He was wrong, because Thomas Hale didn't care about control. He cared about what Emily knew. And when Victor drove away with her in the back seat, silent, wrapped in borrowed warmth, Thomas Hale sat in Murphy's bar, bleeding and smiling, because the trap had already been set. And Ironhaven was about to learn what happened when a respected businessman crossed the wrong kind of father. The next morning, Victor Moretti would wake up to an accusation that could destroy his public life, and a secret buried in ink and signatures that would turn protection into war. Victor Moretti woke up to silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that comes right before impact. The sun had barely risen over Ironhaven, Ohio, when his phone began vibrating on the nightstand. Not ringing, vibrating. One call after another. Missed notifications, stacking like dominoes waiting to fall. Victor didn't rush. Men like him learned long ago that panic only benefited the enemy. He showered, dressed, and poured coffee before finally checking the screen. 12 missed calls. 3 from his attorney. 2 from a city council contact. 1 from a reporter whose number he'd never given out. And 1 message, sent just 6 words. They're calling it kidnapping. Victor exhaled slowly. So this was Thomas Hale's move. By mid-morning, Ironhaven was buzzing. News spread fast in a city that survived on whispers and scandal. A respected businessman allegedly abducting a minor from her father? That story didn't just travel. It sprinted. Victor arrived at his downtown office as cameras were already gathering across the street. His security moved with precision, clearing a path without force. No shouting. No threats. Appear clean. Always clean. Inside, his lawyer Daniel Cross was pacing. They filed a formal complaint. Daniel said immediately, Hale claims you assaulted him and took his daughter without consent. Victor removed his coat. And the police? They're cautious. No warrant yet. But social services is involved. And if this goes public before we get ahead of it, it already is. Victor interrupted calmly. Daniel hesitated. There's more. Victor looked up. Hale claims his daughter signed a consent agreement. Says she agreed to leave temporarily and then disappeared. Victor's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. A document. So that was it. That afternoon, Victor insisted on seeing Emily. She was staying at a secure property on the edge of the city, quiet, guarded, warm. When he entered the room, she stood instinctively, like she expected punishment for sitting. You're safe, Victor said gently. No one's taking you back. Her eyes filled with fear anyway. He told me this would happen. Victor sat across from her. What did he tell you? That no one would believe me. That if I ever left, he'd say I ran away or got stolen. Victor leaned forward. Emily, did you sign anything? She froze. I don't know what it was, she whispered. He said it was for school records, that I had to sign or I wouldn't eat. Victor closed his eyes. There it was. That evening, Ironhaven police arrived, not aggressive, not friendly, professional, curious. They asked Victor to come in voluntarily. He agreed. At the station, Thomas Hale sat with smug expression, his jaw still bruised, his story rehearsed. He painted Victor as a manipulator, a predator hiding behind wealth. "I try to discipline my daughter," Thomas said loudly. "She's troubled." He took advantage of that. Victor didn't interrupt. He waited, because liars always talk too much. When questioned, Victor stated facts only: where he found her, her condition, his offer to employ her. No threats, no emotional outbursts. The officers exchanged looks. Then Thomas smiled. "She signed," he said. "I've got proof." Victor felt the room tilt. The document was brought out, a crumpled agreement bearing Emily's name. The language was vague, legal, dangerous. Consent. Victor's attorney leaned close. "This complicates things." Outside the station, cameras flashed. Headlines formed before facts could catch up. Business tycoon accused of kidnapping. Ironhaven heir under investigation. Victor returned home under scrutiny. That night, his underworld phone rang. "Do you want him gone?" a voice asked. Victor stared out the window at the city. "No," he said. "Not yet." Because killing Thomas Hale wouldn't save Emily. It would bury the truth. Instead, Victor did something far more dangerous. He waited, and Thomas Hale mistook that patience for weakness. 2 nights later, Victor was at his ranch outside the city when headlights cut through the darkness. 3 men stepped out, Thomas and 2 associates, armed and drunk on confidence. Thomas shouted, "You think money makes you untouchable?" Victor stepped forward alone. The fight was savage. No guns fired. Too public. Too loud. Fists. Gravel. Blood. And in the chaos, Thomas screamed a mistake that would end him. "She signed it. She gave me her mother's land." Everything stopped. Victor looked at him slowly. Her mother's land? Thomas's eyes widened. Too late. Victor smiled for the first time, because now it wasn't just abuse. It was fraud. And Emily wasn't just a victim. She was an heir. The next morning, a single hearing would decide whether Victor Moretti was a criminal or whether Thomas Hale would finally face the truth he tried to bury. The courthouse in Ironhaven, Ohio, had never seen a crowd like this. By sunrise, news vans lined the street. Reporters whispered into microphones. Locals gathered not because they cared about justice, but because they smelled blood in the water. A respected businessman, a locked girl, a father claiming innocence. It was the kind of story America never looked away from. Victor Moretti arrived without escort, dressed in a simple dark suit, his expression unreadable. He didn't acknowledge the cameras. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. Men like Victor understood something most people didn't. The moment you perform for the crowd, you lose control of the room. Inside the courtroom, Thomas Hale sat already, arms crossed, leg bouncing with restless confidence. He looked like a man who believed the system belonged to him, because so far it always had. Across the room, Emily sat beside Victor's attorney. She looked smaller than she had days ago. Not weaker, just exposed. This was different from a locked warehouse. Different from a drunken father. This room had rules, and rules had failed her before. The judge entered. The room stood. Then the hearing began. The state opened with Thomas's version of events. A loving father, a rebellious daughter, a wealthy man abusing influence, a signature proving consent. Thomas spoke smoothly, too smoothly. He described discipline as protection, confinement as structure, bruises as exaggeration. "She's emotional," he said, "easily influenced." He offered money, promises. She left willingly. Victor didn't react. He watched Emily instead. Her hands trembled. Then came the document, the consent agreement, the land transfer. The judge examined it closely. "This deed," the judge said, "transfers ownership of the late Margaret Hale's property to Thomas Hale." Thomas nodded confidently. "My wife would have wanted it that way." Victor's attorney stood. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "we request testimony from Emily Hale." The room shifted. Emily stood slowly. Every eye locked on her. She walked to the stand like someone stepping into open fire. "Emily," the attorney said gently, "did you sign this document?" She swallowed. "Yes." Thomas smiled. "And did you understand what you were signing?" "No." The smile vanished. "Can you explain why?" Emily's voice shook, but she didn't stop. "My father locked me in a warehouse. He told me if I didn't sign, I wouldn't eat, that I'd stay there longer." Murmurs rippled across the room. The judge leaned forward. "How often were you confined?" Emily hesitated, then said the words that silenced everything. "3 times a day. Morning, afternoon, night." The judge's pen stopped moving. Thomas stood up suddenly. "She's lying." The judge slammed the gavel. "Sit down." Emily continued. "He told me no one would believe me, that he'd say I was kidnapped or confused. He said powerful men always win." Her eyes drifted to Victor. "He didn't tell me about him." Victor felt something tighten in his chest. The attorney pressed gently. "Did you feel free when you signed?" Emily shook her head. "No." "Did you feel safe?" "No." "Would you have signed if you weren't afraid?" She looked directly at Thomas for the first time. "No." Thomas exploded. "You ungrateful." Deputies restrained him as the judge shouted for order. The damage was done. The judge turned to the document again, eyes cold now. "Coerced signatures are invalid," he said, "and confinement of a minor constitutes a serious criminal offense." Thomas struggled against the deputies, screaming about betrayal, about lies, about ownership. Victor finally spoke. Quietly. "She was never yours." Silence followed. The judge ordered Thomas Hale taken into custody pending formal charges: unlawful confinement, assault, fraud, coercion of a minor. As Thomas was dragged away, he twisted his head back toward Victor. "This city protects monsters," he snarled. "You just happen to be the bigger one." Victor didn't answer, because for the first time, Thomas Hale was right about something. The system had protected him, until it didn't. Outside, the cameras went wild, but Victor didn't step into them. He walked Emily out through a side door. She stopped. "Why did you help me?" she asked. Victor considered the question. "Because someone should have." She nodded. That night, Victor sat alone in his study. The hearing had ended, but the consequences hadn't even begun. Thomas Hale was in custody, but men like Thomas didn't fall quietly. And Victor knew something else now. This wasn't just about Emily. It was about what happens when power meets truth. And the city was watching. Justice had spoken, but the Mafia boss had not. And what Victor Moretti did next would define him forever. Justice is loud when it arrives. Gavels slam. Cameras flash. Headlines scream. But justice never stays loud. It fades. And what happens after the noise? That's where men like Victor Moretti operate. The morning after Thomas Hale was taken into custody, Ironhaven woke up believing the story was finished. A bad father exposed. A brave girl saved. A wealthy businessman cleared. The public moved on quickly. Victor didn't, because he understood something the city didn't want to admit. The courtroom only removed Thomas Hale from Emily's life. It didn't remove the damage he'd done. And it didn't remove the kind of men who watched that trial and learned nothing. Victor stood in his office overlooking Ironhaven skyline. Suit immaculate. Phone pressed to his ear. On the line were voices that never appeared in call logs. "Nothing illegal," Victor said calmly. "Nothing loud." A pause. "Just make sure he never controls anyone again." The line went dead. That was how Victor did things. No chaos. No revenge headlines. Only certainty. Within a week, Victor's attorneys placed Margaret Hale's land into a protected trust. Emily as a sole beneficiary. No loopholes. No future claims. Ironclad. The land wasn't just property. It was leverage Thomas Hale had planned to use for the rest of his life. Victor made sure it became freedom instead. He didn't tell Emily about the underworld pressure applied to freeze every shadow claim tied to it. She didn't need to know how many men suddenly withdrew interest overnight. She only needed to know one thing. No one could take it from her again. Victor returned alone to the warehouse where he'd found her. The building still smelled the same. Rust, fear, old silence. He stood where Emily had been locked and closed his eyes. Then he made a call. 2 weeks later, the warehouse was gone. In its place rose a small, quiet facility, officially a youth protection outreach center funded by the Victor Moretti Foundation. Unofficially, a message, not charity. A reminder. Some places didn't stay hidden anymore. Thomas Hale's trial didn't last long. Evidence stacked quickly once people stopped being afraid. Medical records, witness statements, a pattern no one wanted to see until someone forced them to look. Thomas pled down. Prison time followed. But prison wasn't what ended him. Isolation did. Men like Thomas survived by control, by ownership, by fear. Victor ensured none of that followed him inside. No allies, no favors, no leverage. Just long days where the only thing left was the truth he'd spent years avoiding. Emily didn't stay in Iron Haven. Victor arranged something better. Education, counseling, distance. Before she left, she came to his office one last time. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. Victor didn't look up from the city below. "You don't," he replied. "You live well." She hesitated. "Are you like him?" Victor finally turned. "No," he said quietly, "but I understand men like him." She nodded and left. That was the last time Victor Moretti saw her. And that was the point. Iron Haven changed after that. Not dramatically, not visibly, just enough. Men thought twice before locking doors that shouldn't be locked. Women spoke a little louder, and people whispered about the businessman who never raised his voice, yet somehow ended nightmares without leaving fingerprints. Victor returned to his public life. Galas, meetings, charity dinners. The city applauded him again. They always did. But somewhere deep in Iron Haven's memory, the story stayed. About a girl locked up 3 times a day, and the man who didn't look away. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it listens. Sometimes it waits. And sometimes it walks into a dark place, opens a door, and never lets it close again. Because real monsters don't fear the law. They fear the moment someone stronger decides they're finished. And that night in Iron Haven, a Mafia boss decided exactly that.